43 songs. One drop. And within hours, something nobody expected started happening. Streams slowed, timelines turned hostile, and the word mid started trending right next to Drake like it wasn't even supposed to be there. Not quietly either, loud, aggressive, and everywhere at once. Because this wasn't just another release getting mixed reactions. This felt like a full-on rejection. What makes it worse is how it unfolded. At exactly 12:01 a.m., when the album hit platforms, the first wave of reactions looked normal, fans celebrating, posting snippets, calling it another classic. But by 12:37 a.m., the tone flipped. Entire threads started dissecting the length, 43 tracks, calling it bloated, unfocused, even desperate. One viral post read, "This ain't an album. This a playlist he forgot to edit." And from there, it only escalated. Industry insiders are now whispering that this wasn't the original plan. Sources claim the project was supposed to be cut down to around 15 songs, tight, polished, controlled. But something changed last minute. Allegedly, tracks kept getting added. Old sessions, unfinished ideas, even songs that were never meant to leave the vault. And now fans are shocked because they're starting to notice the inconsistencies. Different sounds, different moods, almost like multiple albums stitched together under pressure. Even more unsettling, a producer tied loosely to the project reportedly said, "He didn't want it to come out like this." That line alone has people asking questions. Because if that's true, then who pushed it? Who approved 43 songs in one drop knowing the risk? And why does it feel like something behind the scenes forced this release before it was ready? Then came the reactions from inside the circle. Subtle at first. Tweets deleted, captions edited, silence where there should have been support. Emotions are running high because instead of defending the project, people close to the situation are stepping back. And fans are starting to notice that too. Because this doesn't feel like a normal album rollout anymore. It feels like something went wrong. And nobody's saying it out loud. Within the first 2 hours, the numbers told a story nobody in that camp was ready to admit. The opening spike was strong. No surprise there, but instead of climbing, the momentum started flattening out. By 2:15 a.m., analysts tracking live data noticed something unusual. Listeners weren't finishing the album. They were skipping. Jumping from track 3 to track 11, then leaving entirely before track 20 even played. And when you drop 43 songs at once, that kind of behavior hits different. Because it doesn't just affect streams, it exposes attention. One insider reportedly said, "It's not that they ain't listening, it's that they not staying." At the same time, fan reactions were becoming more detailed, more critical. This wasn't just surface-level hate. People were breaking down transitions, questioning why certain songs sounded unfinished, pointing out repeated flows and recycled cadences. One viral clip had a fan saying, "This sound like 3 different albums fighting each other." And that line stuck. Because once that narrative caught on, it started shaping how everyone else heard the project. Even listeners who wanted to like it began second-guessing what they were hearing. Behind the scenes, tension reportedly started building almost immediately. A producer who worked on multiple tracks allegedly sent a message into a private group chat that read, "Why is that version on there?" No context, no explanation, but enough to raise eyebrows. Because if the wrong versions of songs made the final cut, that suggests something broke down in the final stages. And when you're dealing with someone at the level of Drake, those kinds of mistakes don't usually happen without pressure. By 3:30 a.m., a second layer of the story started surfacing. Fans began noticing that some tracks had drastically different mixing levels. One song would sound polished and cinematic, the next would feel raw, almost demo-like. That inconsistency became a major talking point. People weren't just questioning the music, they were questioning the process. "Who approved this?" started trending right alongside clips of the most criticized songs. And once that question is out there, it doesn't go away. Then came the comparisons. Older projects were being pulled back into the conversation. Albums that felt cohesive, intentional, curated. Fans started asking what changed. Some blamed the length, arguing that 43 tracks is too much for any artist to control emotionally. Others pointed to timing, suggesting the project may have been rushed to meet an unseen deadline. But the most persistent theory, the one gaining traction fastest, was that this wasn't supposed to be one album at all. That it was multiple eras, multiple sounds, merged together under circumstances that haven't been explained. Around 4:45 a.m., a clip from a past studio session resurfaced online. In it, Drake can be heard saying, "I'd rather give them less and make it perfect." The clip is old, but in the context of what just dropped, it hit differently. Fans are shocked because that mindset doesn't match what they're hearing now. And once that contradiction became part of the narrative, it added another layer of confusion. Meanwhile, reactions from other artists started trickling in, but carefully. No direct criticism, no outright praise. Just vague statements, emojis, and neutral comments that didn't commit either way. That kind of response speaks volumes in this industry, because when something is undeniably strong, support is loud. When it's not, people choose silence. And right now, that silence is noticeable. As the morning approached, another detail began circulating that made things even more complicated. A supposed tracklist draft, unconfirmed, but widely shared, showed a version of the album with only 16 songs. Different titles, different order, and notably many of the most criticized tracks were missing entirely. If that draft is real, it changes everything. Because it suggests the final product we're hearing might not reflect the original vision at all. And that brings the focus back to what happened in those final hours before release. Because albums at this level don't just expand from 16 to 43 tracks without a reason. Something triggered that shift. Whether it was pressure from labels, streaming strategies, or something more personal, nobody's confirmed it, but the signs are there. One person close to the situation reportedly said, "It got bigger than music at the last minute." And that line is sticking with people. Because if this release was influenced by something outside of creativity, something strategic or reactive, then what we're hearing isn't just an album. It's a decision, a move, and maybe even a response to something we haven't fully seen yet. And as more listeners go back through the tracks, searching for patterns, for clues, for anything that explains the chaos, one thing is becoming clear. This wasn't received the way it was supposed to be. And the reasons behind that are only starting to surface. By mid-morning, the conversation had moved beyond fan reactions and into something much more controlled: industry damage control. Around 9-10 a.m., a quiet push started happening across major playlist curators. Certain tracks from the 43-song project were suddenly being highlighted, elevated above the rest, almost like someone was trying to guide listeners toward a safe version of the album. But fans caught on quickly. Because when only 5 or 6 songs are being pushed out of 43, it raises a bigger question: what about the other 37? At the same time, internal frustration reportedly started leaking out. A songwriter who had credits on an earlier draft of the project allegedly posted, then deleted, a message that read, "That's not the album we made." The post didn't stay up long, but long enough to be captured and shared. And once that line hit the public, it shifted everything again. Because now the issue wasn't just that the album felt messy, it was that people involved were suggesting it had been changed. Behind closed doors, conversations reportedly turned tense. One insider described a call that happened late that morning between multiple team members connected to Drake. The tone, according to that source, wasn't calm. Voices raised, questions flying, and one repeated concern: who signed off on this version? That kind of question doesn't come up unless there's confusion at the highest level. And confusion at that level usually means decisions were made quickly, possibly without full agreement. Meanwhile, fans continued digging, and what they found only added fuel to the fire. Several tracks on the album were traced back to snippets that had leaked or previewed years earlier. Not recent material, older ideas, some dating back 2 or 3 years. And while artists revisiting old work isn't unusual, the way these songs were placed, mixed in with newer sounds, made the project feel disconnected. One fan said it best: "It sounded like he cleared his hard drive and hit upload." That line spread fast because it captured exactly how the album was being received. Around 11:30 a.m., a new twist entered the picture. A well-known engineer, someone respected for his ear, reportedly went live briefly before cutting the stream. In that short window, he said something that immediately got clipped and circulated: "Y'all hearing drafts, not finals." He didn't name the album directly, but the timing made it obvious what he was referring to. And if that statement holds any truth, it suggests that what fans are reacting to might not even be the intended finished product. That possibility hit hard. Because if these are drafts, then the release itself becomes questionable. Why would unfinished or alternate versions make it onto a global drop? And more importantly, who allowed it? As the afternoon approached, another layer of tension started showing publicly. A longtime collaborator of Drake posted a single emoji, a broken chain, before deleting it minutes later. It wasn't much, but in a moment like this, even the smallest signal gets amplified. Fans are shocked because that symbol in this context feels intentional. like something that was once connected has now been disrupted. At the same time, reactions from within the artist's extended circle remained unusually quiet. No celebratory posts, no behind-the-scenes footage, no coordinated rollout energy, just silence. And in an industry where perception is everything, that silence becomes part of the story. One observer noted, "It feel like nobody wanna claim this right now." That kind of sentiment doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds when people sense instability. Then came one of the most talked about moments of the day. Around 1:15 p.m., a clip surfaced allegedly showing a private conversation between two individuals tied loosely to the project. In the clip, one voice says, "He kept adding songs last minute." The other responds, "Yeah, but not all of those were supposed to go." The audio cuts off there, but the implication was enough, because it suggests that the expansion from a smaller, more focused album to a 43-track release may not have been fully controlled or fully agreed upon. That idea sparked a new wave of theories. Some believe the decision was strategic, designed to dominate streaming numbers through volume. Others think it was reactive, possibly influenced by outside pressures or competition. But there's also a growing belief that it was personal, that something shifted in the final hours, leading to a decision that prioritized output over cohesion. By mid-afternoon, the narrative had solidified into something much heavier than a simple hit or miss album. This was now being framed as a situation, a moment where expectations, execution, and reality collided in real time. And once that framing takes hold, it's hard to shake. Because now, every detail is being re-examined, every track is being questioned, every silence is being interpreted. And the biggest question still hasn't been answered. Was this the album that was meant to be heard? Or just the version that made it out? By late afternoon, the pressure started turning inward. What began as fan criticism was now echoing inside the circle itself. Around 4:05 p.m., a private listening room in Los Angeles, one known for hosting last-minute playback sessions, was reportedly booked again, just hours after the album had already gone live. That alone raised eyebrows. Because once a project is out, you don't usually call people back in to listen again, unless something feels off. According to someone present, the mood inside wasn't celebratory. It was tense, quiet, focused, like people were trying to understand how things reached this point. During that session, multiple versions of certain tracks were allegedly played side by side. Early mixes, alternate arrangements, even shorter edits that never made the final cut. And the differences were noticeable. One attendee reportedly said, "The tighter versions hit harder. It didn't feel dragged out." That comment started circulating quickly once it leaked out, because it reinforced what fans were already saying online, that the album suffered from excess. Not lack of quality, but lack of restraint. At the center of it all, the spotlight remained fixed on Drake, but now the conversation around him was shifting. This wasn't just about whether the music connected, it was about decision-making. Because when an artist at that level delivers something this large, this layered, every choice gets examined. And right now, people aren't just asking what happened, they're asking why it was allowed to happen. Around 5:30 p.m., another moment added fuel to the situation. A clip surfaced from someone claiming to have been inside a late-night call between multiple team members. In that clip, a voice allegedly says, "He didn't want to cut anything." Another voice responds, "But that's the problem. Everything made it through." The conversation cuts there, but it lands heavy. Because it paints a picture of an artist unwilling to trim, possibly pushing for inclusion over precision. And if that's true, it explains the scale but also the reaction. Meanwhile, fans kept dissecting the project in real time. Entire threads were now dedicated to ranking the songs, not just by quality but by relevance. Which tracks felt essential, which felt like filler, and which felt like they belonged to a completely different era. And a pattern started forming. The most praised songs were often the ones that felt focused, intentional, and complete. The most criticized were the ones that felt rushed or out of place. That contrast only made the overall structure feel more uneven. Then came another unexpected twist. Around 6:45 p.m., a respected critic, someone known for being measured, not reactionary, published a short statement that read, "This isn't a failure of talent, it's a failure of editing." That line spread fast because it reframed the entire narrative. It wasn't about ability, it was about control. And once that idea took hold, it became the lens through which everything else was viewed. Behind the scenes, the ripple effects were becoming more visible. A few collaborators who had been publicly associated with the project started distancing themselves subtly. No direct criticism but less engagement. Fewer reposts. Silence where there might have been pride just a day earlier. The family was left divided, not literally but creatively. Different camps, different opinions, different interpretations of what went wrong. Around 7:30 p.m., another layer surfaced, this time involving streaming strategy. Some analysts began suggesting that the sheer number of tracks may have been designed to maximize total plays, even if individual songs didn't perform as strongly. It's a tactic that's been used before, but rarely at this scale. 43 songs pushes that idea to an extreme, and while it can boost numbers on paper, it can also dilute impact. One analyst reportedly said, "You can win the math and still lose the moment." That line stuck because it captured the tension between strategy and experience. As the evening deepened, the conversation became more reflective. Fans who had initially defended the project began revisiting it with fresh ears. Some found moments they still loved. Others admitted it was harder to get through than expected. Emotions ran high not just because of disappointment but because of expectation. When an artist builds a certain standard, anything below it feels amplified. And then came a quieter but important shift. Instead of asking whether the album was good or bad, people started asking what it represents. Is this a turning point? A misstep? Or something more complicated? A moment where ambition and execution didn't align? Because beneath all the noise, all the reactions, all the speculation, there's a deeper tension building. Not just around the music, but around what happens next. By the time the night cycle came back around, the narrative had fully shifted from reaction to consequence. Around 9:05 p.m., quiet reports started circulating that an emergency strategy meeting had been called involving senior label executives and key members of the team behind Drake. Not a routine check-in, something more urgent. Because at this level, perception moves markets, and what began as fan criticism was now bleeding into brand conversations, partnerships, and long-term positioning. One insider allegedly described the mood as controlled but concerned, like everyone in the room understood that this wasn't just about one album, it was about momentum. Inside that meeting, the focus reportedly turned to recovery. Not panic, but recalibration. Discussions about trimming the project for a revised edition began surfacing, possibly cutting the tracklist down to a tighter 20 or 22 songs, reordering the sequence, even swapping out certain mixes. That kind of move isn't common, but it's not unheard of either. And in a situation where fans are already pointing out excess, it starts to make sense. One source reportedly said, "They're looking at what people actually replaying, not just what's there." That line matters because it suggests a shift from quantity to impact. At the same time, something else started happening, quietly but noticeably. Certain songs from the album began disappearing from smaller regional playlists, replaced by the few tracks that had gained positive traction. Not removed from the album itself, but subtly deprioritized. It's the kind of move that doesn't make headlines, but it shapes how the project lives going forward. Because over time, casual listeners only hear what's being pushed. And right now, that push is narrowing. Meanwhile, the internal tension hadn't fully settled. Around 10:30 p.m., another clip surfaced. This one allegedly from a conversation between two creatives involved in earlier stages of the project. In the recording, one voice says, "We had a version that felt complete." The other responds, "Yeah, but that's not what dropped." There's a pause, then a quiet "I know." The clip ends there, but it adds to the growing sense that the album people are hearing may not reflect the version that once existed behind closed doors. Fans are shocked because that idea, an alternate, more cohesive version, has now become one of the most talked about theories surrounding the release. People are even starting to build their own fixed track lists, cutting the album down, rearranging songs, trying to recreate what they believe the intended experience might have been. And in some cases, those fan-made versions are getting praised more than the official one. That kind of response doesn't just highlight criticism, it highlights missed potential. As the night deepened, reactions from the wider industry began to feel more honest, more unfiltered. A few artists, speaking indirectly, started addressing the situation in interviews and live streams. No names mentioned, but the context was clear. One artist said, "Sometimes having too much can hurt you more than not having enough." Another added, "You gotta know when to stop." These aren't direct attacks, but they don't need to be. In moments like this, indirect commentary hits just as hard. Behind the scenes, another layer of concern reportedly emerged: touring. Because when an album lands unevenly, it affects set lists, ticket demand, and overall energy moving forward. Decisions that were likely planned weeks in advance now have to be reconsidered. Which songs get performed? Which ones get ignored? And how do you present a 43-track project on stage without it feeling just as overwhelming as it did on release? Around 11:50 p.m., a final detail surfaced that left people thinking deeper about the situation. A source close to the rollout allegedly claimed that the last changes to the album were made less than 24 hours before it went live. Not minor tweaks, major additions and sequencing shifts. If that's true, it explains a lot. Because projects finalized that close to release don't always get the space they need to breathe, to be tested, to be refined. And when you combine that with the scale of 43 songs, the margin for error becomes almost impossible to manage. Now, as the first full day closes, the conversation isn't slowing down, it's evolving. This is no longer just about whether people like the album, it's about what it represents. A moment where ambition may have outpaced structure, where volume may have overshadowed vision, where something that could have been precise became something much harder to define. And through all of it, one truth keeps surfacing in different forms. This didn't land the way it was expected to, and what happens next might matter even more than the release itself. And now the situation sits exactly where it gets the most dangerous, right in the hands of the audience. Because what you're watching unfold isn't just a bad album reaction. It's a moment that could shift how Drake moves from this point forward. The questions are louder than the music right now. Was this a calculated risk that didn't land? Was it pressure behind the scenes that forced a 43-track drop? Or was it a rare moment where too much confidence turned into too much content? Fans are still divided. Some are defending the vision, saying it's misunderstood, that it'll age better over time. Others are calling it a complete miss, arguing that editing, not talent, was the real problem. And then there's a third group watching closely, not just judging the album, but waiting to see the response. Because what happens next matters more than what already happened. So now I'm asking you directly, where do you stand? Do you think this was a mistake? Or part of a bigger strategy we haven't fully seen yet? If a shorter version drops, does that fix the damage? Or prove something went wrong from the start? And most importantly, does this change how you look at him going forward? Drop your thoughts below. Every opinion, every breakdown, every theory. I'm reading it all. Because this is one of those moments where the audience actually shapes the narrative. Make sure you like, subscribe, and stay locked in. Because if anything shifts, if a new version drops, if someone speaks out, if the truth behind this rollout comes out, you already know we're breaking it down the second it happens.